While I was in the hospital unconscious, my wife cleared out my bank account. As said in the message, I deserve this after everything I've done for you. I gave a single thumbs up in response. I didn't return home the day after I was released.
I'm Cameron Doyle, a 45-year-old semi-driver with 22 years of experience. Although it wasn't a glamorous existence, it covered the expenses and allowed Dana to continue living the way she had never valued. For weeks, I had been experiencing that constriction in my chest. I convinced myself it was just stress. Only the long hours and poor coffee on the side of the road, until I was unable to ignore it any longer. The discomfort was so intense that I had to pull over somewhere outside of Omaha. I made my own 911 call. I was transported to South Dakota's Sioux Falls. As it happened, I wasn't experiencing a panic attack. My heart was beating rapidly.
Before everything became black, I can still picture the doctor's face. Her words, "We're losing him." Just what you don't want to hear just before you faint.
I woke up 2 days later with a stent in my heart and tubes in my arms. I had flatlined twice, the nurse informed me, claimed I was fortunate. When I looked at my phone, I didn't feel fortunate. Dana had only left one message. We had been wed for 15 years. I only had a mortgage in Sioux Falls, no children, and many quiet dinners at home in between hauls.
A screenshot of our shared account was included in the message. $0 is the balance. I deserve this after everything I've done for you, she commented beneath it. My retirement cushion, a Mercy Reserve and truck maintenance account, totaled $61,438.72.
I ought to have sent something. Perhaps anger. Rather, I simply felt worn out. Sleep couldn't make me feel less exhausted. I emojied her with a thumbs up. Nothing more. I needed to rest, the doctor said when he arrived. Steer clear of stress. For a minimum of 6 weeks, refrain from driving. He inquired as to whether I would be picked up tomorrow.
Yeah, I told a lie.
I called my brother Jeff that evening. The opposite side of town was where he lived. It has been months since they last spoke. Not while we were squabbling. Simply put, our lives were different.
I said, "Need a favor?" "Name it," was his prompt response.
Need a place to crash for a few days, and I need you not to tell Dana.
A pause occurred. She doesn't know you're alive? I answered, "Oh, she knows. She just doesn't know I'm not coming home."
Dana and I met outside of Cheyenne at a gas stop. I was the one who pulled over to help her when she had a flat tire. She treated me like a hero back then since I knew how to use a jack. It's funny how that operates. Eventually, things that first impress people simply become the norm. After 6 months, we were married. Swift yet not careless. She was 27 and I was 30. Young enough to believe in something, old enough to know better. She never liked that I was gone 3 weeks out of 4. But the money was good and she liked what it bought. I'd call every night from whatever state I was passing through. Sometimes the conversations lasted an hour. As the years went on, they got shorter. 5 minutes of updates, then just checking in.
Last couple years, it was mostly text. Made it to Nashville. All good here.
Looking back, there were signs. She stopped asking when I'd be home. Started taking trips with friends I'd never met.
But I trusted her. That's what marriage is, right? Trust.
My brother Jeff helped me into his guest room. He's a construction foreman. Works locally. Divorced twice. Knows something about the ways people can disappoint you.
You should eat something, he said.
I wasn't hungry. I was thinking about the house I'd bought. About the refinancing I'd done 3 months earlier when rates dropped. Dana said she was too busy to come to the signing, so I handled it myself. Put it only in my name since my credit score was better. She never even asked to see the paperwork. There was also the medical power of attorney I'd set up last year. After my buddy Tim had his stroke and his girlfriend couldn't make decisions for him, I got worried. My niece Megan, Jeff's daughter, helped me with it. Law student. Smart kid. She made sure everything was in order. Does Dana know you're here? Jeff asked as he handed me a sandwich.
No, I said. And we're going to keep it that way for a bit. She took everything? I nodded. What are you going to do?
I took a bite of the sandwich. Didn't taste like anything.
I'm going to get some rest. Doctor's orders.
But that night I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, remembering all the little moments where Dana had seemed distant, checking her phone under the table, changing passwords, moving money between accounts for better interest rates.
I've been blind, but not anymore. On my third day at Jeff's place, I got a text from our neighbor, Harold.
Haven't seen you around. Everything okay? Dana's got some guy over. Thought you should know.
I sat with that for a long time. Didn't respond. Just let it sink in.
Later that afternoon, I drove with Jeff to the bank. Not our regular branch where Dana and I were known, but the main office downtown. Asked to speak with a fraud specialist. Showed him the text message with a screenshot. Explained I'd been hospitalized, unconscious that the withdrawals happened without my knowledge or consent. The woman behind the desk kept her face neutral, professional, but I could see it in her eyes. Pity, maybe a little anger on my behalf.
Mr. Doyle, we can start a fraud investigation, but given that it's a joint account and your wife has equal access, it may be difficult too. I understand, I cut in. But I'd like to try anyway. She nodded, started typing on her computer.
We'll need records from the hospital confirming your stay, particularly documentation of when you were unconscious or incapacitated.
Not a problem. And you should know, if this becomes a criminal matter, the police will get involved. I looked at her.
On the way back to Jeff's, we stopped for gas. I stayed in the car while he pumped. Through the windshield, I watched a father with 2 kids buying ice cream from a convenience store. Normal life going on all around me.
Want anything? Jeff asked. I shook my head.
Back at his place, I made 3 phone calls. First to my dispatcher telling him I needed extended medical leave. Second to the credit union where I kept a small business account for my independent contracting jobs. Third to a lawyer friend of Jeff's. I need to know where I stand, I explained. With the house, with the accounts, with everything.
The lawyer, Blake, agreed to meet the next day.
I hung up and pulled out my laptop, logged into accounts Dana didn't know existed, checked the status of investments she'd never asked about. Not because I was hiding anything from her, but because she'd never shown interest in the boring parts of our finances.
While I was doing that, another text came through from Dana this time. Where are you? Your truck isn't at the depot. Did they tell you I came by? I didn't answer. Cameron, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear. We need to talk about this. I put the phone down. Jeff looked over from the kitchen. She reaching out? Yeah. You gonna respond? I closed my laptop. Not yet.
That night I took a walk around Jeff's neighborhood. It was a clear night, stars visible even with the city lights. For the first time since the hospital, my chest didn't hurt. Not physically, anyway. I realized something during that walk. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. And with that came clarity. Dana hadn't just taken my money. She'd given me my freedom. A week after I was discharged, I finally went home. Middle of the day, when I knew Dana would be at her office job. I used my key, walked in like I'd just come back from another haul. The house smelled different. Cologne that wasn't mine. Empty wine bottles in the recycling bin. 2 wine glasses in the dishwasher. I packed some clothes, my important papers, and the small lockbox from the closet where I kept my birth certificate and passport. As I was walking out, I noticed the framed photo from our wedding day was missing from the hallway table. Back at Jeff's, I met with Blake, the lawyer. We sat at the kitchen table with papers spread out between us. The house situation is interesting, he said, reviewing the refinancing documents. Since you refinanced solely in your name with that medical clause, and given your recent cardiac event, you have a strong case for sole possession.
What about the money she took?
Blake frowned. That's trickier. Joint accounts typically mean joint ownership, but he tapped a finger on the bank statements. The fact that she cleared it out while you were medically incapacitated could constitute financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, especially since you have documentation that these were primarily your earnings.
I nodded. And if I want a divorce?
South Dakota is an equitable distribution state. Given the circumstances, I think we can make a compelling case for an arrangement in your favor. He gathered the papers. I'll draft some initial documents. In the meantime, don't contact her. Don't respond if she reaches out. Everything through me now. The next day, Dana showed up at Jeff's house. I was alone, Jeff at work. I heard her car pull up, but didn't look out the window. The doorbell rang 3 times before she started knocking.
I know you're in there, Cameron. Your truck is parked down the street. Her voice was muffled through the door. You can't just hide. We need to talk about this.
I sat perfectly still in the living room like a kid playing hide and seek. Eventually, the knocking stopped. I thought she'd left until my phone buzzed. I'm sorry about the money. I was angry. You've been distant for months. I thought you were cheating. I found out about the house refinancing and panicked. We can work this out. Please talk to me. It was the first time she'd ever accused me of cheating. Projection, probably. I turned the phone face down without replying.
The next day, Blake called with news.
Dana contacted me, he said. She's hired Patricia Wells as her attorney. Patricia Wells, one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in the state, known for going after everything: houses, retirement accounts, future earnings.
What does that mean for us? I asked.
It means she's not playing around. Wells is already claiming that your abandonment after the hospitalization constitutes desertion. She's painting you as unstable, saying you disappeared without explanation and are refusing communication.
I let out a long breath. So what now?
Now we get ahead of this. I filed for an emergency hearing regarding the funds she withdrew. Judge Harmon is presiding. He takes a very dim view of taking advantage of medical situations. After hanging up, I stared at the wall for a long time. Then I made another call to my niece, Megan. I needed her help with something specific. That evening, I drove past our house. Dana's car was in the driveway alongside a black Audi I didn't recognize. I circled the block once, then headed back to Jeff's.
In the driveway, I got a text from a number I didn't know.
This is Patricia Wells. I represent Dana Doyle. Any further surveillance of my client will be documented as harassment. All communication must go through proper legal channels.
They were watching me. I was watching them. And now the gloves were off.
2 weeks after that first meeting with Blake, we had our day in court. Emergency hearing regarding the withdrawn funds. Dana was there with Patricia Wells, both in sharp suits. I wore the only tie I owned, the one I kept in my truck for unexpected funerals on the road. Judge Harmon was an older man with white hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He reviewed the filings without expression, occasionally looking up at Dana, then at me.
Ms. Wells, he finally said, your client withdrew the entirety of the joint accounts while Mr. Doyle was hospitalized for a life-threatening cardiac event. Is that correct?
Wells stood. Your Honor, my client had every right to access those joint funds. Furthermore, Mr. Doyle had recently refinanced their marital home solely in his name without Mrs. Doyle's knowledge, which we contend was the first act of financial deception. The judge removed his glasses. I'm not asking about the house right now, Counselor. I'm asking about the timing of the withdrawal. Was your client aware that Mr. Doyle was in the hospital when she took the money? Dana leaned over and whispered something to Wells. Wells cleared her throat.
Yes, Your Honor. But my client was under extreme emotional distress, believing her marriage was ending. She acted to protect herself financially.
The judge put his glasses back on. While unconscious from a heart attack seems an unlikely time for Mr. Doyle to end his marriage, he shuffled some papers. I'm ordering the funds frozen pending further proceedings. Neither party may access this money until ownership is determined in the divorce settlement.
It wasn't a complete win, but it stopped Dana from spending any more.
As we left the courtroom, Dana tried to approach me. Wells held her back with a hand on her arm, but not before Dana said, "Cameron, please. There's so much you don't understand."
I walked past without looking at her.
Outside, Blake was satisfied. This is just the beginning. Now we start discovery.
Discovery? Part where all the cards get laid on the table.
A week later, Blake called me to his office. When I arrived, he had a folder waiting.
We've got something, he said, sliding it across the desk.
Inside was a bank statement from an account I didn't recognize. Dana's name was on it. The balance, $127,340.56.
Where did this come from? I asked.
Your niece found it. Megan's internship at the credit union downtown gave her some insights. This account was opened 18 months ago. Regular deposits always just under $10,000, just under the reporting threshold. Classic sign of hiding money. There's more, Blake said. The deposits align with your long-haul schedule. When you're gone, money goes in.
I sat back. She's been planning this for a year and a half.
Blake shook his head. I don't think she was planning to leave you, Cameron. I think she was preparing in case you left her.
Why would I leave her? I was working myself to death to provide for us.
That's when Blake slid over another piece of paper, a credit card statement with a hotel charge from a place in Minneapolis. Date, 3 months ago. I'd been in Seattle that week. The name on the reservation was Harold Jensen. Harold, our neighbor, the one who texted me about the guy at our house. Blake's face was grim. We think Harold has been involved with Dana for some time. He was creating a false trail to make you suspicious while they were together. The betrayal wasn't just Dana. It was coordinated, planned. Harold playing concerned neighbor while sleeping with my wife. Dana draining our accounts while I was fighting for my life.
I stood up. What's our next move?
Blake smiled for the first time that day. That's up to you. But if I were in your shoes, I'd make sure they both regret ever thinking they could get away with this. I spent the next month living at Jeff's, recovering physically while Blake built our case. We had a strategy now, document everything, gather evidence of Dana and Harold's relationship, prove the financial deception. My niece Megan was invaluable. Her position at the credit union gave us insight into financial patterns we wouldn't have seen otherwise. Nothing illegal, just connecting dots that were already in plain sight. The account has another person with access, she told me one evening. Not a joint owner, but an authorized user.
Harold, I guessed.
She nodded. And there's something else. They've started moving money, smaller amounts to different accounts. They know we're onto them. I stared out the window. They're liquidating, getting ready to run. That night I called Blake. We need to move faster. I agree, he said. But we need to be careful. If we tip our hand too soon, they'll disappear with everything.
I finished. So what do we do?
Blake was quiet for a moment. We need leverage. Something that makes them think twice about running. The next day, I drove to our house when I knew Dana would be at work. I didn't go inside. Instead, I walked the property line, taking photos with my phone. The new shed Harold had helped build last summer. The fancy landscaping that had mysteriously appeared while I was on a 3-week haul to California. Improvements paid for with my money, likely installed by Harold, raising the property value of the home that was now solely in my name.
I sent the photos to Blake with a simple message, documented.
2 days later, Dana's lawyer called Blake with an unexpected offer. Dana will return 50% of the withdrawn funds in exchange for 50% equity in the house. "They're testing us," Blake said when he called to tell me, "seeing if we'll settle cheap."
What do we tell them? Nothing yet? Let them sweat.
Meanwhile, I made another move. I contacted my trucking company's HR department, explained my situation, asked about the disability insurance I've been paying into for 20 years. "You're entitled to 60% of your salary for up to 12 months, the HR representative explained. "Given your cardiac event and the doctor's restrictions, you easily qualify." I filed the paperwork that day, another source of income that Dana didn't know about. Wouldn't be included in any settlement discussions yet. The next week, I had Jeff drive me past our house again. This time, I noticed something new, a for sale sign on Harold's lawn.
"He's cutting and running," Jeff said. I nodded. "Call Megan."
An hour later, Megan confirmed our suspicion. Harold had cleared out his accounts 2 days earlier, nearly $90,000 withdrawn in cashier's checks.
I called Blake immediately. "We need to act now. Harold's selling his house. Dana might be planning to go with him."
Blake didn't hesitate. "I'll file for an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow, freezing all assets, preventing property sales without court approval."
The next morning, I woke to a text from Dana. "We need to talk. Just you and me. No lawyers." I showed it to Jeff. "They're desperate," he said. I nodded. "Good." I forwarded the text to Blake, who replied, "Don't respond. Injunction hearing is at 2 p.m.
At 1:30, I was walking into the courthouse when I spotted Dana and Harold together in the parking lot, arguing. They didn't see me. I took out my phone and recorded them from a distance. 30 seconds of evidence showing their relationship, something they'd been careful to hide from legal proceedings.
Inside, Blake was waiting. I showed him the video. "Perfect timing," he said. "Judge Harmon is already in a mood today." I straightened my tie. "Then let's not keep him waiting."
Judge Harmon's chambers were smaller than the courtroom. Just the judge, the 2 lawyers, Dana, and me. Harold wasn't allowed in. He wasn't party to the divorce. The video of them together played on the judge's computer. No sound, but their body language said everything. "Miss Wells," Judge Harmon said when it finished, "would you care to explain why your client has been declaring under oath that she has no relationship with this neighbor when video evidence clearly shows otherwise?" Wells looked shaken. "Your Honor, the nature of their relationship isn't relevant to the financial matters at hand."
"It is when financial fraud is being alleged."
The judge turned to Dana. "Mrs. Doyle, are you planning to leave the state with Mr. Jensen?"
Dana's face went pale. I don't..."
"Let me rephrase," the judge continued. "The court has evidence that you and Mr. Jensen have been moving substantial sums of money, that Mr. Jensen is selling his property, and that you withdrew funds from joint accounts while your husband was incapacitated. This suggests a pattern of deception and intent to flee." He looked at both lawyers. "I'm issuing an immediate freeze on all assets belonging to both Dana Doyle and Harold Jensen. Neither may leave the county without court permission." Additionally, he turned to me. "Given Mr. Doyle's medical condition and the evidence of financial exploitation during his incapacity, I'm granting temporary exclusive use of the marital home to Mr. Doyle."
Dana made a small, choked sound. "Your Honor," Wells began, but the judge held up a hand.
"The exploitation of a medically vulnerable spouse is something this court takes very seriously, Counselor. You're lucky I'm not recommending criminal charges at this time."
Blake gathered his papers, trying not to look too satisfied.
As we left, Dana caught my eye. For the first time, I saw fear there. Not of me, of consequences.
3 months after the hospital, I moved back into our house. My house now.
The divorce was finalized faster than anyone expected. Dana didn't fight after the injunction hearing. Harold had disappeared, leaving her to face everything alone. In the end, the judge awarded me the house, my truck, and 80% of our savings. Dana got her car and the remaining 20%. The secret account was split 50-50, but only after she paid my legal fees from her share. I never spoke to her directly again. Everything went through lawyers. Last I heard, she moved to Minneapolis. Starting over, I guess. I sold the house 6 months later. Too many memories. Bought a smaller place closer to Jeff and Megan. Used some of their money to help Megan with law school. She's going to make a hell of an attorney someday. I don't drive long haul anymore. My heart can't take the stress, doctor says. Found work dispatching instead. Home every night. It's quieter than the open road, but there's something to be said for stability. Sometimes people ask if I'm angry about what happened. I'm not. Not anymore. You can't control what others do, only how you respond. Dana thought she was taking everything from me that day in the hospital. Instead, she forced me to fight for myself in a way I never had before. Last week, I was cleaning out some old boxes and found our wedding album. Thought about throwing it away, but didn't. Just put it back in the box. It's part of my story now. Not the end, just a chapter. The heart attack nearly killed me. The betrayal nearly broke me. But I'm still here. Changed. Maybe stronger. Definitely some lessons you learn the hard way. Some people you lose for good reason. And sometimes the life you rebuild is better than the one you lost. During my termination discussion, he grinned and said, "We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary. Just cost cutting, nothing personal." For 18 years, I have been the principal systems engineer at Veltri Housing. My name is Victor Hale, and I am 55 years old. I had designed every expansion, constructed their whole infrastructure from the ground up, and kept everything operating so efficiently that the executives were unaware of how much the business relied on me until they decided they could no longer afford me. Graham Vickers, the recently hired chief technology officer who had only been with the company for 6 months, was seated across from me. He had an MBA from Cornell, wore fancy spectacles, and was 42. He had been hired to modernize operations, which reportedly meant laying off the most seasoned employees first. Human Resources Representative Diane handed a packet across the table and remarked, "The severance package is generous. 2 months' pay plus the vacation time you have accrued." I said thank you, nodded, and accepted the packet. "Is that your only statement?" Graham appeared nearly disheartened. Perhaps he had anticipated my argument or threat of legal action, give him a way to express to the board how challenging I was being. "What should I say to you? The majority of people in your position have queries and worries." I gave a shrug. It seems fairly simple to me. Diane and Graham gazed at each other, both of them equally confused by my composure. They didn't realize that I wasn't at ease. I had just finished. There is a distinction. Graham went on, "Well, we'd appreciate your help with the transition. The system architecture will require some direction from the new engineering team, a consultancy agreement for a few weeks maybe." Even though I knew I wouldn't, I said, "I'll think about it." We exchanged handshakes. I tidied up my desk without protest. One cardboard box contains 18 years of labor. A few co-workers turned away nervously, fearing the same fate might befall them, but I nodded goodbye. My phone buzzed as I made my way to my pickup in the parking garage. Alan, the database administrator I had employed 12 years prior, texted me. "This is Vic. The entire squad is in a panic." I didn't answer. At home, I had a drink of bourbon while watching the sunset paint the water copper from my deck with a view of Lake Ontario. Elaine, my wife, touched my shoulder. "Now what are you going to do?" I gave a shrug. "Something is going to appear." I hadn't just constructed their systems, which was something Graham was unaware of and hadn't bothered to find out. Because the corporation had consistently refused to provide funding for a comprehensive documentation team, I had custom-coded major areas myself with little documentation. The complex network design, the hidden security layers, and the deep redundancies were all only understood by me, and I had no intention of telling anyone about it. I started at Veltria Housing back when it was called Bayview Properties, a small real estate management firm with 4 apartment complexes and a dozen employees. Their entire IT infrastructure consisted of 2 desktop computers, a fax machine, and a dial-up internet connection. The owner, Harold Bay, hired me away from a consulting gig in Syracuse. "We're expanding," he told me. "Need someone who can build us something solid." Over 18 years, I turned that rudimentary setup into an integrated property management system that handled everything from tenant applications and background checks to automated maintenance requests and rent collection across 63 properties in 4 states. I built it piece by piece, adapting, upgrading, refining as the company grew. When Harold retired 5 years ago, his son Justin sold the company to a private equity firm that rebranded it as Veltria Housing. They kept me on, impressed by what I'd built. But things began to change. New executives, new priorities. Quarterly targets became more important than long-term stability.
My warning signs came gradually. First, they rejected my proposal for a documentation team.
"Too expensive," they said. "We'll get to it next quarter."
That quarter never came.
Then they started bringing in consultants, young MBA types who talked about disrupting property management and leveraging cloud solutions. They'd sit through my explanations of our system architecture with glazed eyes, then recommend off-the-shelf solutions that wouldn't integrate with our custom infrastructure. I kept pushing back, explaining why their approach wouldn't work, showing them the custom code that made our system unique. Eventually, they stopped inviting me to planning meetings.
Elaine noticed it before I did.
"They're pushing you out," she said one night over dinner. "You need to prepare." I brushed her off. "They need me. No one else understands how the whole system works together."
That might be exactly the problem, she replied.
6 months ago, they hired Graham as the new CTO. He came from a banking software company and immediately started talking about standardization and legacy system replacement. He hired 3 junior engineers fresh out of college, had them shadowing me, asking questions about the system. I answered their questions, but I knew they weren't grasping the complexities. How could they? It had taken me years to build those systems, to understand the interdependencies, to create the redundancies that kept everything running smoothly when problems arose.
Last week, Graham stopped by my office.
"Quick meeting tomorrow morning," he said casually. "Just a quarterly check-in."
I should have seen it coming.
The first call came 2 weeks after my termination. I was in my home office updating my resume when my phone rang. Graham Vickers. I let it go to voicemail. "Victor, it's Graham. We're having some issues with the tenant portal. The junior team is working on it, but they're having trouble understanding some of your code architecture. Could you give us a call back? It would just be a quick consultation."
I deleted the message and went back to my resume.
3 more calls came that day, each voicemail sounding increasingly desperate.
By evening, Alan texted me.
"System's been down all day. Maintenance requests aren't processing. Graham's losing his mind."
The next morning, Diane from HR called.
"Victor, I hope you're doing well. I'm calling because we'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement, just temporary, to help with some current system issues. The compensation would be quite generous."
The owner, Harold Bay, hired me away from a consulting gig in Syracuse.
"We're expanding," he told me. "Need someone who can build us something solid." Over 18 years, I turned that rudimentary setup into an integrated property management system that handled everything from tenant applications and background checks to automated maintenance requests and rent collection across 63 properties in 4 states. I built it piece by piece, adapting, upgrading, refining as the company grew. When Harold retired 5 years ago, his son Justin sold the company to a private equity firm that rebranded it as Veltria Housing. They kept me on, impressed by what I'd built. But things began to change. New executives, new priorities. Quarterly targets became more important than long-term stability.
My warning signs came gradually. First, they rejected my proposal for a documentation team.
Too expensive, they said. We'll get to it next quarter.
That quarter never came.
Then they started bringing in consultants, young MBA types who talked about disrupting property management and leveraging cloud solutions. They'd sit through my explanations of our system architecture with glazed eyes, then recommend off-the-shelf solutions that wouldn't integrate with our custom infrastructure. I kept pushing back, explaining why their approach wouldn't work, showing them the custom code that made our system unique. Eventually, they stopped inviting me to planning meetings.
Elaine noticed it before I did.
They're pushing you out, she said one night over dinner. You need to prepare. I brushed her off. They need me. No one else understands how the whole system works together.
That might be exactly the problem, she replied.
6 months ago, they hired Graham as the new CTO. He came from a banking software company and immediately started talking about standardization and legacy system replacement. He hired 3 junior engineers fresh out of college, had them shadowing me, asking questions about the system. I answered their questions, but I knew they weren't grasping the complexities. How could they? It had taken me years to build those systems, to understand the interdependencies, to create the redundancies that kept everything running smoothly when problems arose.
Last week, Graham stopped by my office.
Quick meeting tomorrow morning, he said casually. Just a quarterly check-in.
I should have seen it coming.
The first call came 2 weeks after my termination. I was in my home office updating my resume when my phone rang. Graham Vickers. I let it go to voicemail. Victor, it's Graham. We're having some issues with the tenant portal. The junior team is working on it, but they're having trouble understanding some of your code architecture. Could you give us a call back? It would just be a quick consultation.
I deleted the message and went back to my resume.
3 more calls came that day, each voicemail sounding increasingly desperate.
By evening, Alan texted me.
System's been down all day. Maintenance requests aren't processing. Graham's losing his mind.
The next morning, Diane from HR called.
Victor, I hope you're doing well. I'm calling because we'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement, just temporary, to help with some current system issues. The compensation would be quite generous.
I picked up my phone. How generous?
$300 per hour, minimum 4-hour engagement.
I'll think about it and get back to you, I said, then hung up.
I sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the lake. Elaine placed a cup of coffee in front of me.
What are you thinking? I'm thinking they're finding out exactly what I'm worth.
Over the next 3 days, the calls increased. Graham, Diane, even Justin Bay, who was still on the board. The tenant portal was down. The maintenance scheduling system was throwing errors. The automatic payment processing had failed, affecting thousands of residents.
I didn't respond to any of them.
On day 4, an email arrived from Devlin Systems, a regional competitor to Veltria. They managed fewer properties but had been expanding rapidly. The email was from their director of technology, Lawrence Devlin himself. Victor, I heard about your situation at Veltria. We've always admired your work from afar. Would you be interested in discussing opportunities with us? We're looking to upgrade our entire property management infrastructure.
I replied and set up a meeting for the following day.
That evening, as Elaine and I were preparing dinner, my doorbell rang. Graham Vickers stood on my porch, his designer glasses slightly askew, his normally immaculate suit wrinkled. Victor, I apologize for dropping by unannounced, but we have an emergency situation. The entire system is down. Nothing is working. The team can't figure out what's wrong or how to fix it.
I leaned against the door frame. That sounds serious.
It is. We need your help. The board has authorized me to offer you a substantial consulting fee, $500 per hour. Whatever it takes. I thought about the cardboard box in my garage. 18 years of work reduced to a few mementos. I thought about nothing personal, just cost-cutting. I thought about the documentation team. They'd never approved. "I'm sorry to hear about your troubles," I said quietly. "But I have an interview tomorrow. Something will turn up, just like I thought." I closed the door on a stunned face and went back to making dinner. For the first time since my termination, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just clarity.
I wasn't going to help them fix what they'd broken.
The interview with Lawrence Devlin went better than expected. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Rochester, away from both companies' offices. "I followed your work for years," Lawrence said, stirring his coffee. "That integrated property management system you built at Veltria is legendary in our industry. Nobody else has anything close to it." "Thank you," I said. "It took time. That's what I want to talk about, time. We're looking to build something similar. But we don't want to start from scratch. We need someone who understands the architecture, the integration points, the security layers. Someone who can build us something better than what's out there." "I'm interested." Lawrence smiled. "Good, because I'm prepared to offer you the position of Chief Systems Architect. Full benefits, stock options, and a salary 20% higher than what you were making at Veltria." It was a good offer. Too good, almost. "Why me?" I asked. "There are younger engineers out there. Cheaper ones." Lawrence laughed. "You sound like your former employer. We tried that route. Hired 3 bright young engineers from top schools. They build us something sleek and modern. That crashes every time we get more than 100 simultaneous users. We don't need cheap. We need reliable." I accepted the offer the next day. Meanwhile, Veltria's problems were escalating. Alan kept me updated through occasional texts. The system had been partially restored, but critical functions were still failing. They brought in an expensive consulting firm that specialized in legacy system recovery. A week after I started at Devlin, Graham called again. "Victor, please, this is getting serious. We've lost access to payment records for the past 3 months. Tenants are complaining about incorrect charges. The consulting team says they need your input on the database structure." I was tempted to ignore it, but something made me pick up. "Graham, I'm employed elsewhere now. Exclusive contract. I'm afraid I can't help you. We'll double whatever they're paying you for just 2 days of your time." "It's not about the money." "Then what is it? About revenge? Are you enjoying watching a struggle?" I paused, considered my answer carefully. "No, Graham, I'm not enjoying it. But you made a business decision. You decided my experience wasn't worth the cost. Now you're discovering what that actually means. The board wants to discuss bringing you back. Full salary plus a signing bonus." For a moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it quickly faded. Going back would solve nothing. The same executives who decided I was expendable would be waiting for the next opportunity to cut costs. I appreciate the offer, but I've made a commitment to Devlin Systems. Graham's voice hardened. "You know, there could be legal implications if we discover you intentionally made our systems difficult to maintain. Non-compete clauses. Intellectual property concerns." There it was, the threat I'd been expecting. "The system is exactly as it was when the company repeatedly denied my request for a documentation team." I replied evenly. "Every line of code belongs to Veltria, as specified in my employment contract. I've taken nothing with me except my experience. But feel free to have your lawyers contact mine." I hung up, hand shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from anger I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. The accusation that I'd somehow sabotaged him was a final insult. At Devlin, I was starting fresh. Building systems properly from the ground up, with full documentation, training programs for the engineering team, and redundancies that would prevent the kind of catastrophe Veltria was experiencing. I wasn't going to look back anymore, but I wasn't going to help them either. Some lessons had to be learned the hard way. A month after joining Devlin Systems, I received an unexpected visitor in my new office. Alan, my former database administrator, stood awkwardly in the doorway, holding a laptop bag. Got time for lunch? He asked. Over sandwiches at a nearby deli. Alan filled me in on the chaos at Veltria. It's worse than you think, he said, lowering his voice despite the noisy lunchtime crowd. They've lost access to historical data, going back 3 years. The backup systems are corrupted somehow. The consulting firm is saying they might need to rebuild from scratch. I wasn't surprised. The backup system had multiple redundancies and security protocols that needed to be followed precisely. Skip one step, and the entire process would fail, in a way designed to protect tenant data from unauthorized access. That's not all, Alan continued. I found something when I was trying to help the consultants understand the payment processing system. Graham had been planning your termination for months. He'd been meeting with the board, convincing them that your custom infrastructure was too expensive to maintain. How do you know this? Alan pulled out his laptop and showed me a series of emails he discovered in the system archives. Emails between Graham and the board, discussing the legacy staff reduction plan, and specifically naming me as the first target. He told them they could replace you with cheaper engineers and transition to off-the-shelf solutions within 6 months, Alan said. He projected cost savings of over $1 million annually. I read through the emails, feeling a strange attachment. One line from Graham stood out. Hale's custom systems are unnecessarily complex. He's made himself indispensable by design, not necessity. There's more, Alan said. The private equity firm that owns Veltria is planning to sell. They've been prepping for this for over a year. Graham was brought in specifically to cut costs and make the company look more profitable before the sale. Now it all made sense. The push for standardization, the resistance to proper documentation, the sudden focus on reducing senior staff costs. It was about dressing it up for a quick flip. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Alan closed his laptop. Because I quit yesterday, and I'm not the only one. Half the IT department has left. The consultants are estimating at least 6 months to restore full functionality, maybe longer. He hesitated. And because Veltria's biggest client, Westbrook Properties, is considering jumping ship, they've lost faith in the management system. I thought about the implications. Westbrook represented nearly 30% of Veltria's revenue. Losing them will be devastating, especially with a sale pending. What will you do now? I asked. Alan grinned. Actually, I was hoping Devlin might be hiring database administrators. Later that afternoon, I spoke with Lawrence about bringing Alan on board. He agreed immediately. We were building a team, brick by brick, with people who understood what it meant to create systems that lasted. That evening, I received another call from Graham. This time, his voice had lost its authoritative edge. Victor, please. The situation is critical. Westbrook is threatening to terminate their contract. The board is questioning my decisions. We need your help. I'm sorry, Graham. I can't help you. Name your price. Anything. It's not about price. It's about respect for experience, for the work that goes into building something right the first time. The line was silent for a moment. You knew this would happen, he said finally. You knew exactly what would break and when. No, Graham. I just knew what I had built and what it took to maintain it. Information I tried to share many times. I ended the call feeling neither triumph nor regret, just a quiet certainty that some lessons can only be learned through failure. The opportunity came faster than I expected. 2 months into my role at Devlin Systems, Lawrence called me into his office. I just got off the phone with Jeffrey Westbrook, he said, referring to the CEO of Westbrook Properties. They're officially terminating their contract with Veltria next month. They want to know if we can handle their portfolio. Westbrook Properties manage over 10,000 units across the Northeast. It would more than double Devlin's current operations. We're not ready for that kind of scale. I admitted. The new system is coming along, but it's only halfway there. Lawrence leaned forward. What would it take to get ready if we had to? I thought about it. 3 more senior engineers, dedicated server infrastructure, and at least 8 weeks of development time. Even then, it would be tight. Jeffrey's desperate. Veltria's failures are affecting their reputation with tenants. He's willing to give us 12 weeks and fund the infrastructure expansion. This was the moment. the turning point. If Devlin took on Westbrook and succeeded, it would establish us as a serious competitor in the industry. If we failed, it could sink both companies. Let me think about the architecture. I said, I'll drop a plan by tomorrow. That night, I barely slept. I sketched system diagrams, mapped data migration pathways, considered scaling challenges. By morning, I had a plan, ambitious but achievable, a hybrid approach that would let us onboard Westbrook's properties in stages, minimizing disruption. When I presented it to Lawrence, he studied it carefully. "This is solid," he said finally, "but I notice you've included a substantial documentation phase that adds 3 weeks to timeline." "It's non-negotiable," I replied. That's where Veltria failed. We document everything from day one. We train the team on every component. No single point of failure. Lawrence nodded. "I'll take your word for it. Let's move forward." The next weeks were intense. We hired 5 more engineers, including 2 who had recently left Veltria. Alan built a database migration tool that could translate Veltria's data structure into our new system. I designed a modular architecture that could scale with Westbrook's needs. Halfway through the project, I received an email from Justin Bayou, the former owner's son who still sat on Veltria's board. "Victor, I want to apologize for how things ended. The board was misled about the implications of letting you go. Graham has been removed as CTO. We're struggling to recover, and Westbrook's departure will hit us hard. If you're ever interested in coming back, the door is open." I didn't respond. 10 weeks into our 12-week timeline, we were ready for a stage rollout. Westbrook's smallest region, comprising 2,000 units in western New York, would migrate first. If successful, the remaining regions would follow. The day before the migration, Lawrence called me into his office again. A familiar face was waiting, Jeffrey Westbrook himself. "So you're the system architect?" Jeffrey said, standing to shake my hand. "Lawrence has told me a lot about you." "Oh, good, I hope," I smiled. "He says you've built us something that won't break down every time we add a new property. Something that will grow with us." "That's the plan. I also hear you used to work for Veltria." I nodded, unsure where he was going with this. "They're in trouble, you know. The private equity firm is trying to sell, but with Westbrook leaving and their system still not fully functional, they're not finding many interested buyers." He paused. "Except one." "Who's that?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "Devlin Systems," Lawrence said. "We're considering making an offer at a substantial discount to what they were valued at 6 months ago." I looked between them, processing the implications. "If that happens," Jeffrey continued, "we want someone who understands both companies to lead the integration. Someone who could salvage what's valuable from Veltria's infrastructure while transitioning everything to your new architecture. Are you asking if I'd be willing to work on that?" I clarified. Lawrence nodded. "Only if the acquisition goes through, and only if you're comfortable with it." I thought about the irony. The system I'd built, the people I'd trained, the company that had discarded me, all potentially coming back under my direction. "I'd be willing," I said finally. "But I have one condition. We do it right. Full documentation, proper training, no shortcuts." "Agreed," Lawrence said. "We've learned that lesson." As I walked back to my office, I felt no vindication, no desire for revenge, just the simple satisfaction of knowing that good work done right eventually speaks for itself. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of what had once been Veltria Housing's headquarters. The sign now read, Dellin Integrated Property Management. The acquisition had gone through for less than a quarter of what the company had been valued at before my departure. Lawrence and I walked through the office, greeting former Veltria employees who would be staying on through the transition. Some looked away awkwardly. Others smiled with relief. A few, those who had worked closely with me over the years, nodded with quiet understanding. Graham was gone, along with most of the executive team that had approved my termination. Justin Bayou had stayed on as consultant, helping ease the transition with legacy clients. When we reached the server room, my old domain, I paused. Through the glass, I could see the hardware I'd specified, the blinking lights of systems I'd designed. "Want to go in?" Lawrence asked. No need, I replied. We'll be migrating everything to the new infrastructure anyway. In the main conference room, the remaining Veltria staff had gathered for the announcement. Lawrence introduced me as the Chief Integration Officer, who would be overseeing the technical transition. Many of you already know Victor, he said. He built the original systems that ran this company for nearly 2 decades. Now he'll be guiding us to the integration of both companies' technologies into something better than either had before. As I looked out at the faces, some familiar, some new, I felt no triumph, no desire to say, "I told you so." What would be the point? Instead, I spoke briefly about the transition plan, the timeline, the support that would be available to everyone during the process. I emphasized that no one would be left behind due to cost-cutting measures. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. 1 year after the acquisition, Delvin Integrated Property Management had become the largest property management company in the Northeast. The migration was complete, with all properties now running on the new system I designed. Fully documented, properly staffed, and functioning smoothly. On a crisp autumn morning, I drove to the office for a final meeting with Lawrence. The leaves along Lake Ontario had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, a fitting backdrop for the conclusion of this chapter. The board approved your proposal. Lawrence said as soon as I sat down, the Technical Education Division will launch next quarter. You'll have full autonomy to design the curriculum and hire instructors. This had been my condition for staying after the integration was complete. Not a higher title or more money, but the creation of a division dedicated to training the next generation of systems engineers and architects, teaching them not just how to code, but how to build things meant to last. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." "No, thank you," Lawrence replied. "What you've built here, it's remarkable. Not just the technology, but the culture around it, the documentation, the knowledge sharing, the emphasis on quality over quick fixes." Later that afternoon, I cleared out my integration office. Unlike my hasty exit from Veltria, this was a planned transition to my new role. As I packed my things, Justin Bayou knocked on the door. "Got a minute?" he asked. We walked to the small courtyard outside the building. "My father asked about you," he said. "He's retired in Florida now, but he still follows company news. He was glad to hear you were back, in a manner of speaking. How is Harold?" I asked. "Good. Fishing a lot." Justin paused. "He always said letting you go would be the biggest mistake this company could make. Turns out he was right." I nodded, unsure what to say. "I learned something from all this," Justin continued. "Value isn't always visible until it's gone." As I drove home along the lakeshore, I thought about value, of experience, of care taken, of doing things right the first time, about systems built to last and the people who build them. I hadn't sought revenge. I hadn't needed to. I'd simply moved forward, building something better, something that would outlast any individual decision or short-term thinking. Sometimes the best response to being undervalued is simply to prove your worth elsewhere and let the results speak for themselves.